Okay, so the next process that we have is define scope. And so define scope is the process of developing a detailed description of the project and product. So it belongs to the project, to the planning process group. And I might say that this is a little bit poorly named because we've really already defined the scope. So really what we're doing is we're detailing the description of the project and the product, because the scope's already defined. But far be it for me to complain to PMI. Well, I would complain to PMI about the name. So anyways, but define scope. So we have as our inputs the charter, the project management plan, and when you think about that, that's even, project management professional as an acronym overloaded. We've got the project documents, and then we've got our EEFs and our OPAs. And the tools and techniques we use to define the scope include our expert judgment, our data analysis, decision making, interpersonal and team skills, and product analysis. And so then our outputs are the project scope statement and the project document updates. So I guess this is why, remember we were looking at that question and we decided the answer was B, the project scope. So we've got kind of the scope is really coming out here and being refined. So that's, remember when we were talking about...
Well, I see it's the output.
Yeah, so it's the output here. So that's why it wasn't the output previously.
Thanks.
Okay, so the next process, so the next process we have is to create the work breakdown structure. And again, this is the process we talked about where we subdivide the project deliverables and project work into smaller, more manageable components. And again, this is a planning process because every plan can't have plan in the name. So, and as we were talking about define scope, obviously this is a planning also. So for create WBS, we've got the PMP, we've got the documents, we've got the EEFs and the OPAs. And to create the work breakdown structure, we're going to use our expert judgment and we're going to use decomposition techniques, basically starting at whatever level we determined to cover the waterfront, and then we're going to break those down. And then the outputs become the scope baseline and the project document updates. So remember, we had our high-level scope in the project charter, but now we're going to refine it, and we're going to have that baseline against which we're going to measure going forward. Okay, next we're going to validate scope, and again, this is a little bit poorly named because really we're not validating the scope, but that's what it's called. So this is probably the worst named process of all the 49 processes. So validate scope is the process of formalizing acceptance of completed project deliverables. So this should really be validate deliverables. Anyways, it belongs in monitoring and controlling. So, this is a tough one because at least it has the scope name, so it's in the scope knowledge area, but you can't tell from validate except, because it doesn't have monitor or control in its name. But you start out with the project management plan, the documents, the deliverables, and the work performance data. And remember, we somehow got this work performance data. We haven't really gotten to how we got that data yet. But then we use inspection and decision making to basically validate the completed deliverables. So what comes out of this, you can see, are not really scope so much as they are accepted deliverables, the work performance information. So you see we've got work performance data over on this side, and we've got work performance information that we've worked through our inspection decision-making process. So we've improved the data to becoming information, and then we've got potential for change requests, and we've got the potential for project document updates. So these two things don't necessarily always happen, but there is the potentiality that those could happen. So this is one you might want to memorize in terms of what goes on here, because validate scope is a bad name. But, it's not descriptive of what you get in the outputs, and it's not really descriptive of what you do in the processes.
So during that time, it's inspection and decision making.
Right, so this is really formalizing acceptance of the completed project deliverables. So this is really, it should really be called validate deliverables, but then it would have nothing in its name which gave you any idea of which knowledge area or process group it was in. So I guess that's why scope is in the name. But I digress. Okay, so next we're going to control scope. And control scope is the process of monitoring the status of the project and product scope and managing changes to the scope baseline. It belongs in the monitoring and controlling process group, which is good because it has control and scope, so you know exactly what intersection this process falls at. Again, we've got the project management plan and the other documents. We've got the work performance data, and we've got our OPAs, and we're going to use data analysis. And of course, data analysis is going to take that work performance data, and it's going to make that into work performance information. Again, we have the potential for change requests and for these various project management and other project document updates. So, and again, this is a heavy hitter for the project manager to be carrying out, because even if they're not exactly doing the monitoring, they're doing the data analysis to control the scope and make sure that we are within the scope initially defined by the charter and then further defined previously in defined scope and refined. Okay, so now here's some important outputs. And so these are important outputs from the various processes in the scope knowledge area. So we've got the work performance information. Remember, we started with the data, and then we're going to use data analysis in our various other processes to create information from that raw data. You know, because if I said it's however many degrees it is, it's probably 98 degrees here in Houston, you can't really tell if it's a miserable day or a nice day. You know, you've got to add something to that and say, and humid, or the misery index is 103, or at least it's not raining, to, you know, give you more information about just the raw data. Go ahead, you had a question?
Okay, so the raw data gets converted into work performance data.
Well, no, work performance data is the raw data, and then you do some analysis on it to actually make it informational in nature.
Okay.
So, for instance, I could say it's 85 degrees in Houston, and you might think, that's not a bad day, you know, because that's just raw data. But then you say, well, it's tremendously humid, so with the misery index, it feels like it's 93. In which case, you think, okay, it's not such a nice day. So the work performance information is the result of some kind of analysis or conglomeration of data such that the raw data now has meaning. Because data is just data until it becomes information. And then we've got the accepted deliverables, and these are the ones that have been accepted. So that's important. And so now they're ready for validation against the project scope, at which point then you've done, you know, you've completed part of the project work. And then of course change requests, anytime that when you're looking at parts of the project, there might be new requirements discovered, because it does, you know, when at your bottom level of the work breakdown structure, it doesn't completely cover the waterfront, and so you want to make sure that you add the things that are necessary. Now, this is not gold plating, this is just completing this, because, for instance, you don't want to create a laptop with no means to charge it, so you've got to have the power brick and the power cord. So, you know, for instance, adding an email notification when a password is changed. And again, these changes need to be documented as change requests because they weren't in the original requirements, but it is just something fundamentally necessary to the success of the project. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the data, information, knowledge, wisdom spectrum. So basically, you start with data, and of course that's important, and then from data, you get information, the who, what, where, when, and then that becomes knowledge, how, and then the wisdom is the why, why that happened. So basically the DIKW, so we've got our D and our I and our K and our W, is the development of data into actual knowledge. So along this transition, we go from data to information and finally into reporting. So because, data is just the discrete facts, generally indisputable because it's just the facts. And then information requires applying meaning or relevance to the set of facts, and necessarily some translation, which could possibly have some personal influence built into that. Okay, so now again we have our business scenario, and you get to come up with a solution. Ready for that?
Let's see. This is drawing matrix. Leading project service company for 10 years. Now, the balance matrix, we know that the functional and the project are on equal ground.
Correct.
A strong matrix, the project manager, I thought, had more control.
Yes.
Okay. System and create policies. Well, first of all, he's going to have to change. Well, this is a new project. Let's see. Oh, it's actually an addendum because it's going to change the scope. So not only is it going to change the scope, but a change request will have to be put through. That includes the financial, what's involved. He's going to have to break it down into time frame, to cost, the who's, and submit this. Brian's current project is currently under budget. Well, it doesn't matter that that one's currently under budget because this is an add-on. So it's like a separate deliverable. So I'm not 100% sure. I mean, that's how I would handle it. I'd put through a change request. It's an add-on to an existing project.
Good. And so, since this was a formal request by a stakeholder, and that's really the only way a stakeholder should make a request is formally, again, Brian should follow the request process. So you analyze the costs and the benefits, whatever your business case scenario is, like you said, for an add-on to the project.